All right, so a popular topic, manhood and masculinity. I want to cover this topic in the honest way, the earnest way, and stuff, because this concept has been hijacked by people with commercial, religious, political agendas, all types of agendas that are counter scientific, okay? Um, Honestly, and stuff. Um, I'm not going to talk about so much about the military's view of masculinity and stuff because masculinity has to be that way in a military context. Military is a whole different world and stuff. It's different morals, culture and stuff. The sensitivity to violence is much lower. Maybe the awareness is the same, and but the the sensitivity is much lower and stuff. And it's definitely a different variation on masculinity. It is a Martian version of masculinity and stuff. The Spartan view of masculinity. Um, I guess you can call it, with a long, rich tradition. I don't try to assume some kind of authority of knowledge in that area and stuff because all I did was go to military school. Okay, not for bad reasons, for good reasons. I just wanted a really good education, and I was willing to work hard. Um, so yeah, and this, but it will be mentioned and stuff, but um, that view should be respected because that is an upholding institution in our civilization, in addition to everything else stuff. Um, yeah. So as a forward, manhood is variably defined, rarely ever in an encapsulating way, and often in contradictory points of view. Manhood is often twisted, perverted, etc., and I would like to clear the smoke to set the record straight and stuff. Okay. Having a man-defined manhood seems intuitive, but it's better to let science and philosophy define it. Words should not be personally defined. We should let the data speak first and then understand what it says. Okay? Conflicting and hijacked ideas of manhood have threatened society repeatedly, being hijacked from religions, political organizations, and malicious people posing to function in a leading intellectual capacity, with an emphasis on posing, because there are some unwritten but written laws of intellectualism that I've written down and stuff that that explain the crimes and stuff of the intellect. Okay. Um, Quick word about patriarchy. Okay, and stuff, because I understand that the topic of feminism and women's rights is important and stuff. Human rights is also very important. Okay. Now, many feminists, not all of them, and stuff, claim that patriarchy hurts men with some degree of truth. Is compromised men or boys that get hurt by the need for desperado, overwork, emotional suppression, etc. Fully mature men in their prime are ready to handle life's pains and trials, which I describe in another lesson. They just are, okay? I don't need to reiterate about the dangers of right wing ideologies and political organizations, okay? So if you came to this video thinking like of wanting to hear something from your echo chamber or whatever, um, no, there's no political agenda here. I'm not here to sell you or get you on something. I'm here to teach you and stuff. I'm here to pass on the truth. All right. Now about toxic masculinity. It's a thing. It exists. And now this is just the first episode in this video series, so I'm not like um. So I'm gonna go into this some more later and stuff. It's not always about what you say and do, it's about how you make people feel and your impact or wise lack of involvement in their lives. Sometimes the most compassionate, altruistic thing that you can do for a person is to just not get involved in their life. Okay? Life will teach you that. Okay? Masculinity has always happened by perhaps. It just sort of fell out of the pipe not too long after testosterone fell out of the evolutionary pipe hundreds of millions of years ago. So we could study it deeper and discover what it really is. We are driven by the urge to do what men naturally do. As humans, we can choose the path of developing flesh, but we can also develop mind and spirit. Something commissioned our existence to realize the greatest of works in accordance with some supreme information. Masculinity can be added to this, okay? It doesn't have to be considered in a separate consideration or whatever. Um, Now, these are the types of manhood not meant to exclude any other points of view, okay? Theoretical manhood, constructed by semantic, scientific research, and logic, are grounded philosophy. Historical manhood, as defined by what a boy turns into when he does what men have traditionally done, okay? It also means who men are and have been. We can factor out the roles given to them to see our potential. Everybody from, everybody who made it through the Marine Corps basic training in the 80s, 60s, 40s, and stuff. Everybody uh, who was fighting with pirates in the Caribbean and stuff. Um, everybody who formed tribes and stuff, um, or were um, you know some sort of the male progenitor of some people and stuff historically, like Romulus and Remus. Um, you know, those are some examples of historical masculinity and stuff. Characteristic, distinct things that men do, generally, roughly, that they do that women choose not to and stuff. Not that women are made not to, but they choose not to. Okay. Um, Biological manhood, the byproduct of virilization, including masculinization. The brain and body alter from testicular activity, okay? Generally speaking. There's other chemicals that come in there like 5-alpha reductase and other things that facilitate the conversion and production of testosterone and stuff, the stimulation of testosterone from the pituitary gland. The biological manhood breaks into the non-gonadic manhood, okay? Um, Young manhood, prime manhood, old manhood, thyroid manhood, and stuff. A more scientific intellectual type of manhood. So pituitary manhood, another type of intellectual manhood. Okay, muscular manhood, arguably the most popular. Gonadic manhood, the classic like biological type of manhood. The manhood that arises from a man being gonadic male. So okay, adrenal manhood, bad brains manhood, and criminal manhood. These right here are not biological. Okay. So the the idea that masculinity correlates with criminality, it just doesn't work. Gender is not a predictor for crime, okay? It just isn't, okay? It's not a predictor, and it's certainly not an encapsulator, okay? Religious manhood as taught by scripture and religious cultures, okay? Religious manhood is one of the hijacked forms of manhood. And criminal manhood as well and stuff. If a person's born and raised in a neighborhood with significant gang activity where you have to be in a gang to survive and stuff, then they're they're going to be taught that what they do is part of being a man, even though you'll probably end up in handcuffs. And then they're going to break your balls in prison, figuratively speaking, for all the people that must take everybody literally and stuff. But yeah, so it's like I've said before, men, if you abuse your balls, somebody or something's going to come and clip them. Okay? And that's the principle right there. So these types get some things right, and the other things are personally contrived or serve some purpose of social structure, be it commissioned, accidental, or natural. Okay? Men generally roughly have different brains, which makes them act and think differently. Men naturally inclined to being warriors, being violent, etc., but war comes out of, involves, or leads to crime. So it should not be automatically assumed that men are meant to be warriors or violent people, just automatically, They should have different options for what kind of men they wish to be, which is one of the places where the feminists get it right. Some aspects of manhood are in fact toxic, and mind you, I'm not an expert in feminism and stuff. I'm still reading the theory and stuff to understand what it is and stuff. Not just American feminism as it is manifested in America, which is actually the focus. But yeah, some aspects of manhood are in fact toxic and harm all genders. Okay. Masculinity throughout history. So, oh, I, yeah, I wrote yesterday. That's funny. Historically, men become fathers. Okay, when we become fathers, we learn how to love, provide, protect, guide, be paternal support, and care for. Understand? Because now you're not just looking after an adult that can significantly look after herself and stuff. You're thinking about the baby you already have, the toddler and stuff. You're thinking about their needs. The elementary school age kid and so on. The teenager. Warriors. We grow teeth. We learn to use it. We learn to dominate opponents. Yeah, men are dominating appointments by skipping out on the doctor, right? We learn to endure pain and exhaustion. Okay, male friends, male coworkers, boyfriends, fiancés, husbands. I just lump them all together. We learn to love, protect, support, and care for. We learn that being a man of worth, a good man, in part means knowing how to talk to and act towards women. Okay, and I purposely write something other than what I say because this is what I wrote, okay? And because I want to make it clear that um fucking eyes itching. Um that I'm not just reading off these slides, okay? So, we learned how to be sexy, sound sexy, be attractive and sound attractive for one of many things. So, relationships are actually fantastically complicated and take a lot of time and energy. People who say otherwise are probably getting cheated on. Sorry. So, brothers, support, guide, protect, respect, horse around. Yeah, this is what brothers do. You know, um, horsing around includes like rough play and stuff. Male boys, they rough play to develop physique and stuff, and confidence, and regulate their aggression and stuff. Um, yeah, generally, roughly speaking, it's not with all boys. Leaders, including patriarchs, male chieftains, and regents, we learn to lead. We take people through complication, confusion, darkness, hardship. Okay, in order to lead them to victory, we think and calculate deeply. We make tough calls. Okay. So we take all these people through all these things in order to lead them through victory. So because this is what's ahead of them. Sometimes it's what you have to deal with. Masters, lords, and commanders. Okay. Professionals. We learn to be skilled, polite, knowledgeable. We learn to work hard when we can't just solve it out or fight. Okay. Hunters. We learn to survive and provide. Okay. Teachers. We learn to study the vast universe of knowledge out there and raise others up with it. Competitors. We learn to compete and be dominant. Psychologically tough. We learn to endure mental and emotional anguish, learn to overcome it. We learn to master our emotions to further eliminate weakness. Okay? Thinkers. We learn thinking skills and we get great memories. Okay? Designers and inventors. We think deeply, we calculate, we solve problems. Okay? Now, what are some problems of masculinity and stuff? I'm not over here to like just romanticize everything, like be some douchebag and stuff. Good, powerful spirit, health consciousness, emotional control, being mentored by experts and masters. Traditional notions of masculinity were too much about preparation for commercial, political preconception, dominated, or religious environments. To understand manhood, one must isolate it from all else. Okay, we got to factor it out in your brain. Okay, men traditionally learn to ignore their own feelings because remember, we're arriving at an encapsulatory definition to explain the concept. We're not trying to there's there's no take here and stuff. We're just getting the facts straight. Okay. Um, Now, men traditionally learn to ignore their own feelings as an internalization of society's belief that their feelings don't matter in the process of self-awareness through seeing oneself vicariously through others. Many, if not most, were brought up to ignore intellectual and more emotion-driven pursuits, and this is some of how men have been taken over as slaves. Okay. As a human being, your emotions are part of your power. Okay. It's part of your memory process. It's part of your thinking process and stuff. And it's part of your habitus of your mind. When you think about something and feel something about an idea and stuff, a lot of men are conditioned to block this out and stuff, which creates like this emotionally stunted, stiff, dumb man that cannot organize ideas in his head and solve problems correctly and stuff. And then he just has more problems. You know, this is part of how manhood got confused with being a slave to society's expectations, how men were taught that their sole purpose was selflessness at their own expense with no mercy on them as men. Okay? Men are power seekers. They are competitors. They seek to dominate. They are conquerors. The pure, unadulterated masculine is about power, fearlessness, unstoppability, resolve, strength, strong-mindedness, independent thinking, carrying out intelligent thoughts, etc., making use of incredibly powerful sex-determining hormones that are hundreds of million years old to create wonders, okay? There's multiple androgens, that's why. They seek to always mantle over, dominate, etc., always achieving new heights and proving their greatness. Do you understand? Not that men are automatically great, but they use prowess to prove that they're great, okay? Power, fearlessness, unstoppability, resolve, strength, toughness, mania, dominance, truth, affinity, fearlessness, badassery, ferociousness, competitiveness, reasonability, attentiveness, and chaotic tendency encapsulate the essence of manhood because a man of rank seeks to have the mental power to realize the maximum dominance of his masculine, virile physiology, which is rugged and meant to fight, work, resist, etc. This unconquered is that much more easily a doormat for real men, okay? So when you don't conquer this, you're much more easily a doormat for the more mature, developed men, okay? Men mature to become masters of their emotions. Their emotions are energy that can work for them, and the trait of emotionality is not gender exclusive. It is not, okay? This is not like being emotional is not just a woman thing. It is a human thing, okay? We've always been emotional, okay? But elevated androgen levels more easily make available the ability to turn off emotional reactivity, that shared tendency with women that makes them emotional, have affectation, etc. Okay? In social systems, men die in droves from economic insolvency, which even extends to the insufficiency of medical care. Economically successful, decisively calculated, healthy men survive, thrive, and procreate, as life always compensates effective economic strategies met with decision-making skills. But men's unique approach to this through the toolkit of human and masculine psychology. They task, struggle, fight, sweat, exert, compete, debate, argue, rationalize, solve, calculate, etc., until the most is realized from their capacities. Okay? When a greatest possible being could love us for what we aspire to be, or loves us for what we did, what we said, or who we are, then we know we aspire in the right direction. This fact is why men, imperatively speaking, have to be good. Do you understand? Because there's this notion of the ideal bad boy and stuff. In mass media a lot, who gets a lot of women, but you know he's dealing drugs that go anywhere. He might murder or assault, um, and so on. How is this being a man? So if that is being a man, then being like what are biological males supposed to do? Like this is it's foolishness. So again, because of this slide right here, this is why men, imperatively speaking, have to be good out of that rhetorical line of questioning. Okay? So there's that. And that concludes episode 1 of the topic of manhood and masculinity.